The first time I saw her smirk, I knew trouble was coming. Karen, the HOA president with a reputation for making everyone's life miserable, had crossed a line that even I couldn't ignore. My daughter, Emily, was only 9, shy, and navigating the world with cerebral palsy. Yet there she was, Karen, standing in my driveway, mocking Emily's walker like it was a joke. "Why don't they just wheel her into the pool?" Karen sneered, laughing in that high-pitched, cruel way that made your skin crawl. I froze. The neighbors glanced away awkwardly. My heart pounded, and all I could think was, "Not today, Karen. Not anymore." This wasn't the first time Karen had made life miserable for our street. Complaints about garden gnomes, Halloween decorations, even the precise shade of paint on our mailbox had filled the HOA meetings. But mocking a child? That was a war I wouldn't let slide. Emily's face turned red, tears pooling in her eyes, and I felt a mix of fury and helplessness. At that moment, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just a parent anymore. I was a shield, a force ready to fight back. I remember standing there, clenching my fists, while Karen strutted like she'd won a game we didn't even know we were playing. She tossed her head back and laughed, oblivious to the storm she was about to unleash. That night, Emily barely slept. Her tiny frame trembled as she whispered, "Why does she hate me, Daddy?" My heart broke in two. But anger can be a powerful motivator, and I decided this wasn't just about protecting my daughter. It was about reclaiming our dignity. The next morning, I started documenting everything. Videos of Karen's rants, witness statements from neighbors who had seen her behavior, and every cruel thing she had ever said or done. I knew I couldn't rely on hope or casual warnings. I needed a permanent solution that would ensure she couldn't hurt Emily or anyone else again. By the time the HOA board meeting rolled around, I was armed with evidence, strategy, and determination. This wasn't going to be a negotiation. It was going to be a reckoning. When I walked into that meeting, Karen didn't see the man who would challenge her. She saw the storm in motion, and I could tell. She sensed that her days of mocking my daughter were numbered. Little did she know, her next move would set off a chain reaction that would impact her in ways she never imagined. The tension in the HOA meeting room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Karen arrived with her usual flair, a smug grin plastered across her face, convinced she owned the room. But this time the script had changed. I wasn't just a parent protecting my child. I was a force with a plan, and everyone else in that room could feel it. I had collected every shred of evidence over the past weeks. Videos of Karen mocking Emily, witness statements from sympathetic neighbors, and a record of her countless overreaches. Every detail was meticulously documented. This wasn't a fight fueled by anger, it was strategy. As the meeting began, Karen immediately tried to dominate the conversation, cutting off board members and berating anyone who dared disagree with her. "We need to enforce the rules," she barked. "People need to follow standards." Her voice was sharp, the kind that made grown adults flinch. But I stayed calm, letting her rant, because the more she spoke, the more the board would see the true nature of her character. I could almost hear Emily's small voice in my head. "Daddy, don't let her win." Finally, I stood. Silence fell. Every eye in the room turned toward me. I spoke deliberately, recounting step by step what had happened with Emily, emphasizing Karen's cruelty and disregard for others. I presented the videos and statements, letting the evidence speak for itself. There was no room for denial, no wiggle room for excuses. Karen tried to interrupt, but the chair of the board held firm. My calm, collected delivery contrasted sharply with her theatrics, and slowly, I could see the cracks in her facade. What I had planned next was subtle but decisive. I proposed a resolution. Karen would face financial responsibility for Emily's ongoing therapy, an unexpected but justified consequence. It wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was a direct action to protect my daughter and ensure Karen recognized the real impact of her cruelty. Whispers rippled through the room. Karen's face went pale, then red, then contorted with fury. She sputtered, trying to argue, but the evidence was undeniable. Every neighbor who had secretly hated her overreach nodded quietly, some even openly showing support. By the end of the meeting, it was clear. The power dynamic had shifted. Karen was no longer untouchable. She had mocked my daughter, underestimated my resolve, and now she was facing the consequences. In front of everyone she had tried to control. That day, I realized something vital. Standing up for your loved ones isn't just about protection. It's about turning injustice into accountability. Karen left the room that day simmering with anger, But I knew her fury was powerless against the storm I had set in motion. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a transformation she would never forget. Karen didn't take her defeat quietly. In the days following the HOA meeting, she prowled the neighborhood like a caged animal, glaring at anyone who dared make eye contact. Every step she took seemed fueled by bitterness, but her attempts to intimidate neighbors only backfired. People who had once stayed silent now spoke up, sharing their own experiences of her cruelty. The shift in the neighborhood dynamic was palpable. Karen's power was waning, and for the first time she realized she wasn't untouchable. Meanwhile, Emily began her therapy sessions funded by Karen's mandated payments. Watching her progress, seeing her smile after a session where she conquered a small but significant milestone was deeply satisfying. This wasn't just justice, it was healing. Not just for Emily, but for me too. Every laugh, every small achievement in therapy reminded me why standing up to Karen had been necessary. Her mockery had been cruel, but it had inadvertently created a path for Emily to thrive. And that knowledge made every confrontation worthwhile. Karen tried subtle retaliation. She sent passive-aggressive letters, complained about harmless things, and even attempted to gather support from a few neighbors still loyal to her. But the tide had turned. With each attempt, she only exposed herself further. People were tired of her manipulations, her arrogance, her cruelty. The neighborhood began quietly mocking her in return, sharing the absurdity of her rules and the irony of her punishment. It was poetic justice in slow motion, and every small victory for the community strengthened our resolve. Then came the moment that truly humbled Karen. A local journalist caught wind of the situation, how a high-powered HOA president had mocked a child with a disability and was now legally responsible for funding her therapy. The story went viral. Public opinion shifted from curiosity to outrage. Karen's name became synonymous with arrogance, cruelty, and the consequences of underestimating a parent determined to protect their child. Her reputation crumbled overnight, and her attempts to reclaim authority were met with ridicule. Through it all, Emily flourished. The therapy was working, her confidence blossoming, and she had begun to see herself not as a victim, but as someone unstoppable. Karen's attempts to diminish her had only revealed Emily's resilience, and I realized something profound. True power isn't about intimidation, control, or status. It's about standing firm for what's right, turning adversity into growth, and ensuring that cruelty never goes unchecked. Karen had mocked my daughter, tried to belittle our family, and underestimated the quiet strength of those she thought powerless. But in the end, she became the lesson for everyone watching. Actions have consequences, and sometimes justice isn't just poetic, it's transformative. By the time Karen realized the full impact of her actions, it was too late. The viral story had spread beyond our neighborhood, drawing attention from advocacy groups and local media. People were shocked, not just at her cruelty, but at the fact that a parent had stood up and held someone so powerful accountable. For the first time, Karen was no longer the person calling the shots. She had become the cautionary tale everyone whispered about, a reminder that arrogance and cruelty have consequences. Meanwhile, Emily's therapy sessions were flourishing. Each week, she celebrated small victories, a new skill mastered, a task she previously struggled with accomplished independently. Watching her grow stronger and more confident filled me with pride. Karen's mockery, which once felt like a wound, had transformed into a driving force for empowerment. Every dollar she was now contributing toward therapy was a reminder that justice could be measured not only in accountability, but in tangible, meaningful progress. The neighborhood atmosphere changed too. What had once been tense and fearful under Karen's reign of petty control became a place of quiet solidarity. Neighbors who had suffered under her micromanagement now supported one another openly. There were fewer complaints, more laughter, and a sense of safety that had been absent for years. Karen's attempts to regain influence were met with polite dismissal or subtle mockery. Her power, once intimidating, was gone, replaced by a mix of embarrassment and begrudging acceptance that the game had changed. One afternoon, as Emily proudly demonstrated a new skill she had learned in therapy, she turned to me with a bright smile and said, "Daddy, she can't hurt me anymore." It struck me how much weight had lifted from both our shoulders. Karen's reign of cruelty had ended, but the story didn't end with punishment alone. It ended with growth, empowerment, and the undeniable truth that resilience triumphs over malice. Emily wasn't just surviving, she was thriving, and nothing Karen could do would ever take that away. Looking back, I realized that standing up for Emily had been about more than confrontation. It had been about teaching her, and everyone watching, that courage matters. That injustice, no matter how small or personal, deserves accountability. And that sometimes, the strongest response isn't anger alone, but measured action that turns cruelty into opportunity for healing. Karen had mocked a child, underestimated a parent, and attempted to intimidate a community. In the end, her actions funded Emily's therapy, empowered a neighborhood, and reminded everyone that true strength lies in standing firm when it matters most. Emily's triumph is ongoing, a living reminder that justice can be both firm and transformative. And as for Karen, she learned in the hardest possible way that cruelty always has consequences. If you loved seeing justice served in Emily's triumph, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another unbelievable HOA story. Drop a comment below telling us what you would have done if you were in my shoes, and don't forget to like the video to support Emily's journey. Let's keep standing up against bullies, one story at a time.